It's time for To the Max Sports, where we talk about sports. They're just two guys, Max and Drew, in a bar talking all things sports. Well, without the bar. And the beer. Wait, why aren't we in the bar?
Hello, and welcome to the Flying Whippet Production Studio, just a stone's throw away from the world-famous Alamo in downtown San Antonio, Texas.
Which, if you're coming down to visit, yes, there are steel beams and construction, and don't be scared off.
That is Bob's pet peeve.
No, my pet peeve is the people coming to visit the Alamo.
That's
Go
true.
visit a real mission.
Okay, go somewhere else.
Walk.
Yeah, we're kind of grumpy. Get off my lawn already. We haven't been doing a lot of shows, Bob. We've been busy, but I brought in our special draft guru today. And introduce yourself, sir.
What's up, guys? My name's Carlos. Been working with Drew on some of these podcasts, and it's good to be back, man. It feels good. Draft's coming up in a couple days, so we got a lot to talk about.
I'll tell you, the draft's like an event now. To me, it's almost like the Super Bowl. I get excited, and it's a fun event.
Which proves the marketing genius of the National Football League.
Absolutely.
We get hyped by people calling a name and people walking across a stage.
It's the only sport we really talk about truly year-round. But let's get right to it.
Yeah.
We're going to do a mock first round. Please leave your comments. If you think we're totally off, screwed up your team, leave a comment, let us know. But this is going to go 1 through 32, and I'm going to start off with Tennessee. I think it's pretty obvious with Will Levis moving on that Tennessee's going to draft Cam Ward out of Miami. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all the signs are kind of pointing that way. You look at what the Titans have done this offseason. They haven't done nothing to address the quarterback position. They have added to the offensive line, which, they needed to shore that up. So, and I've kind of seen some videos and TikToks and stuff like that with Cam Ward on, like, Twitch and stuff like that. So, apparently his top wide receiver right now is Calvin Ridley. So, great story for Cam Ward. If you didn't know, he actually started off here at Incarnate Ward for 2 years.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he ended up winning.
We're in San Antonio, Incarnate Ward, just right down the road here.
Yeah, he enrolled, I believe, in 2020. I think his first year was a COVID year. So his first year as a freshman actually won an FCS championship. Then he went to transfer on to Washington State. Just lit up the stat sheets, ended up transferring again to Miami, and the rest is history. And I think it's a well-deserved. He was just so you know, also too, is a 0-star recruit coming out of high school. Insane.
Yeah, so from 0-star recruit to probably the top pick in the NFL draft. We won't get into the merits of how we think they'll do in the NFL, just for time purposes, but we will discuss the player and the potential of the need of that team when they draft. So good observation. Cleveland. I've got Travis Hunter. They snagged Flacco, so I don't know if they're tanking for next year, which is obviously going to be the Peyton Manning sweepstakes.
Yeah.
I don't believe any NFL team can tank, but you can just put players in positions that your team might not do as well as others. And I think the sweepstakes for Manning and next year's on.
Yeah.
Having said that, I've got Travis Hunter from University of Colorado going to the Browns.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I think more and more every single day that Travis Hunter is kind of a lock for that second overall pick. When you get a guy who can help you out on offense and defense, that's kind of a unique talent. I don't know if he'll be the Shohei Ohtani of the NFL, but
he can be.
Yeah.
To throw a little ice on the speculation. He can't be. Shohei Ohtani really is only going to pitch and take the mound if he comes back from his Tommy John once every 6 days.
Yeah.
And the reality of the NFL is, and he can play both ways, but he's not going to play a lot of both ways. He's going to be a very, very targeted package wide receiver and out. He's also going to be a targeted package on the defense as well. Yeah. The one thing we also need to understand is that the pace of play in the NFL is slower than it is in college. College, Colorado was typically running, 100 plays on offense. His NFL team is not going to run 100 plays. Yeah. There's maybe 60, 70. Yeah. And no wide receiver plays all 60, 70 plays. So he could go both ways. I don't know if it's a good idea. And If he had to go one way or the other, which would you pick him to be? If he had to give up one.
Yeah. Well, I think right now, the way the Browns are kind of set up, I think they need the help at wide receiver. Other than Jerry Jeudy, I'm not sure what they have as far as offense. And then on defense, they still have a couple of good corners. I think, there's going to be some intrigue as far as Greg Newsome. He's coming up on a contract year. The Browns are kind of strapped for cash, so I think maybe next year we can see him more at corner. But I got to admit, watching Travis Hunter, this past year in college football, as a wide receiver, it was just so much fun to watch. I mean, amazing hands, super smooth. He's got the speed. So, kind of gives me a little bit of shades of Justin Jefferson, just a little bit. I know it's kind of a lofty expectation, but, really fun to watch.
Absolutely talented player, and I'm sure at this point Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are crossing their fingers that Cleveland doesn't pick them, because that's where quarterbacks go to die.
Yeah,
Cleveland,
and
Ohio.
it's kind of crazy if you think about it. If there's anybody that's going to change the franchise for the Cleveland Browns, you would think it'd be Shedeur Sanders, but why not get the best player in college football instead?
Yeah, no, I agree. Moving on, the New York Giants at third.
Yeah.
A lot of people were saying, does Shedeur go here? There's been talk of that. They snagged Russ. They picked up Jameson.
Yeah.
They got 2 veterans. Maybe another team tanking for next year by just putting players out there to fill gaps. I don't think they'll go with Sanders. I actually have Abdul Carter, the edge from Penn State, going to the Giants.
Yeah, that seems like the most logical thing for them to do, take the best player available. I know they have a lot of edge rushers, but now you add Abdul Carter to this defense. You have a really interesting you have a defense that looks really good on paper. Obviously, they still have to play the games, but, I think really the idea for the Giants right now with general manager Joe Shane and head coach Brian Daboll, they're on the hot seat. Like, if they don't win games, I don't think they're going to make it past the season. We all kind of remember what happened on Hard Knocks. They lose Saquon. Saquon goes to Philly, ends up winning a Super Bowl. Even Joe Shane's son, I remember he had said something about, trading up to get Jane Daniels. You only get one chance to do this. So right now the Giants have only one chance to do this.
Absolutely. We'll see if they do it right. The Patriots, so they're going fourth.
Yeah.
They got a great young quarterback. Well, I wouldn't say great, but I think he is capable of developing.
Yeah.
And he kind of saw his progression last year, but you got to protect your young quarterbacks. And here's, I think, where they go to LSU and grab Will Campbell, the offensive tackle from LSU.
Yeah, I agree with that pick as well. I mean, a lot of interesting ways they could go. You think about, giving Drake May a good running game as well, maybe possibly Ashton Genty. I know they have Ramondre Stevenson, but Genty would be an upgrade. But I think at the end of the day, this offensive line for the Patriots was really bad last year. And if you want any type of success, and I know that Mike Vrabel, what he wants to do is have a really good offensive line, have a really good running game, protect the quarterback. And Will Campbell kind of just seems like a Mike Vrabel type of guy. They're super tough. He's got great technique, great footwork. I can see them going one-on-one in practice a couple times too.
Yep. So our fifth pick, or the fifth selection, is the Jaguars.
Yeah.
Now, so last night I accidentally drafted 2 players, a player, 2 teams. That's impossible. But it was funny because if you screw up this draft when you're writing everything down, you literally have to reshuffle the deck. So I was talking to you earlier in the parking lot. These NFL teams, they're probably like, man, our guy's gone. And now you got to go to plan B. And it's the reason I say that, the guy I'm going to select next, have the Jaguars selecting, I had him going 28th before I had to reshuffle the deck because of my mistake. Now I got him going 4th.
Okay.
And I got Greg Zabel.
Okay.
North Dakota State.
I like that. Yeah.
And the reason I picked him is the Jaguars' offensive line's a mess.
Yeah.
And they have several gaps they got to fill in that offensive line. And this is one of the few players in the draft that you can plug and play in different positions.
Yeah.
And so I think he fits with the Jaguars.
Yeah,
I've got Zabel.
I really like Gray Zabel. I mean, at North Dakota State, he's one of the very few offensive linemen that actually had to play all 5 positions at the offensive line. So you talk about versatility is super important right now in the NFL. There's not a lot of good offensive linemen, especially in this draft. I think there's going to be a little bit of a drop-off with the tackles. So I definitely see the tackles kind of sliding up just a little bit because, you have to protect your quarterbacks. And Trevor Lawrence, definitely needs that type of support. As for me, I'm going a different way. I kind of got stuck between, once again, Ashton Jeanty. You add him to that Jacksonville offense. You give Trevor Lawrence a really good run game. You look at what Liam Cohen did for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year. You talk about one of the worst run games 2 years ago to a top 5 run game. So Ashton Jeanty, an absolute game changer at the running back position. Travis Etienne got 1 year left on his deal. Tank Bigsby has some issues fumbling the ball, but ultimately I had to pull myself together for this one, and I decided to go with Mason Graham out of Michigan. I just think that defense needs help at almost every single level, and I think that's just going to be the best available. Mason Graham is going to be a good cornerstone piece. You add him to Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker, Eric Armstead. You have a nice little front 7 there.
No, I couldn't disagree with you on that. Fifth pick in, and we have our first change. You mentioned Ashton Jeanty. I've got him going to the Raiders at 6. I think it's a great fit for the Raiders. They just got Geno Smith. You got Carroll in there. Their defense is playoff ready in my mind, the Raider defense. What they needed was a running back last year to take the pressure off some of those young quarterbacks. They got a veteran quarterback now who will have Jeanty, and I really believe if he's there, the Raiders grab him at 6.
Yeah, same thing here. Unless somebody was to trade up, which I definitely think could be an option. But for the Las Vegas Raiders, you talk about another team that struggled to run the ball last year. They had so many injuries at the running back position. They need some consistency, and Ashton Jeanty is that. He's got some special, unique talents, and I think this is definitely a Pete Carroll type of guy. You look back at what they've done, even at USC, he had Reggie Bush, Lendell White, and then obviously in Seattle, Marshawn Lynch. And I wouldn't be surprised if Marshawn Lynch was going to hang out around the facility, maybe giving him a couple tips here and there. So, yeah.
So going at 7, we got the Jets. The Jets have a lot of offensive issues. They lost Morgan Moses. Having said that, and because of that, and just a plethora of offensive needs, and I apologize if I misspell his name. I've got Armand Membu, right tackle from Missouri, going to the Jets at 7.
Yeah, I have the same thing here too. It's kind of hard. A lot of people are looking at Tyler Warren, the tight end, and giving Justin Fields another target to throw to would be really interesting. But I think at the end of the day, if you really want to support Justin Fields, you need to continue to build that offensive line. You have Olu Fashanu on the left side. Now you have Armand Membu on the right side. You have 2 bookend tackles that can possibly be there for the next 10 years. And I know that, Tanner, I don't know how to say his last name, but the new offensive coordinator, he's also from Detroit. So they know how important it is having a good offensive line. And I would think, looking at Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, you talk about David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, 2.0 type of thing. So I think that'd be really fun to watch.
Yeah, for the Jets it makes sense, but then again, nothing makes sense with the Jets.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens. Number 8, we have the Panthers. Man, I was really torn here. I'm going to tell you, I was torn between Jalen Walker and, apologize if I misspell his name, Tutorio McMillan, the wide receiver. At the end of the day, I feel like you got to give Bryce some weapons. He's got size. He's got speed. I went with McMillan.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I'll say is Dave Canales coming over from Tampa Bay. They had Mike Evans for 10+ years there, and T-Mac. I think the comp for him is actually Mike Evans, or maybe a floor Drake London. And I mean, if you can get something in between that, I think that's huge. The wide receiver group in Carolina is kind of a mixed bag. So I went the other way. I went defense. I think this last year, they had a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball, but I just think they need some juice. I think they need some energy. They don't really have a dominant defensive player on that side, maybe other than Derek Brown, but he's coming off an injury. So I think adding, Jalen Walker I have out of Georgia, the versatility, he's going to be kind of that joker linebacker position. He's still kind of learning the linebacker position position, but you talk about the athleticism. He's a freak of nature. So, yeah, you can't go wrong with Georgia defensive players, as we know.
I was torn between the two, so we were right on spot there. At number 9 and falling into the lap of New Orleans is where Shedeur Sanders will be drafted. I think he's going to be Carr's understudy, kind of like what they did in Atlanta with the young kid this year. I could be wrong, but I think if he slips to 9, New Orleans picks up Sanders.
Yeah, no, I originally had Shedeur going to number 9 to the New Orleans Saints, especially with the issue going on with Derek Carr. I don't even know if this shoulder's injury, it sounds like it's not real, honestly, because it's not like, something that's breaking news anywhere. So there's still a lot of intrigue there. But, I actually, had an idea. I think kind of what you said earlier with maybe the Browns and the Giants, they're tanking for next year for Archie. Well, I think the Saints might be doing the same thing here too. I think they want to get Archie. He's a kid from Louisiana, New Orleans native. So I think if there's anybody that wants Archie Manning more than anybody, I think it would be the Saints. And so I have the Saints going a different direction. I wanted to go offensive line. I think that offensive line needs some work, but I think the bigger issue is actually the cornerback position. I actually have them going with cornerback Will Johnson out of Michigan, tall, long corner, super athletic. For some reason, the injuries kind of hurt his draft stock, so I feel like this would be an absolute steal. You look at the Saints cornerback group. They lost Marshawn Lattimore last year during a trade. They lost their best corner in Paulson Adebo, so there's a big opening there. And I have them going with Will Johnson there.
So you don't have Sanders yet. Is he going to be the guy with the camera on him, nervously looking around?
I have a
be the Manziel this year?
Yeah, I have a theory about that, but I will let you know once we get there. Yeah.
Okay, so at 10 we have the Bears, and this is where I have Jalen Walker going edge.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. They definitely need some help on the edge. They, have some room for improvement on that side of the ball. But ultimately, I had to go with offensive tackle here, Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. Once again, they brought in 3 new offensive linemen. I think they just do a 4th one. Josh Simmons, before the injury in October, he's a guy that people were going to argue is the best offensive tackle in this draft, and I think he has the highest ceiling of anybody in this draft as far as the offensive line. So I want him, and they still have Braxton Jones, so Simmons doesn't have to play right away, and then or maybe Braxton Jones gets traded. The Bears, the issue for them right now in this draft is, yes, they have 2 picks in the second round. They're very high picks, but after that, they really don't have any draft picks after that. So maybe possibly if they wanted to move up or move down, they're going to need some help there.
You make a good case. At 11, Bob, see if his ears perk up. San Francisco. To me, he's the best interior lineman in the draft this year. I got Mason Graham from Michigan going to San Francisco.
Yeah, and I think if Mason Graham wants to fall to 10, there's no way he's getting past the 49ers here. But obviously I already have Mason Graham off the board. So for me, I'm going still back to the defensive line. The problem for the 49ers is they lost about 30 to 40% of their roster from last year. So this is uncharted territory for, general manager John Lynch and head coach Kyle Shanahan. So they need to go back to doing what they do best, and that's getting after quarterbacks. So I have them going with an edge rusher. I was really stuck between Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. I think the guy plays with an intensity and motor that, people are going to fall in love with. But I had to go with the upside here. I went with Mikael Williams out of Georgia. I have 2 Georgia guys going in the top 11 picks. I just think,
like you said, Blue.
Yeah, his upside is, incredible. You put him opposite of Nick Bosa, you start to rebuild that defensive line.
Dallas, I think that with Martin gone now, they go to tackle and they grab Kelvin Banks out of Texas.
Yeah, I absolutely love that pick. It's kind of a safe pick for the Cowboys. They can't go wrong with drafting offensive linemen, especially if, they have the new head coach, Brian Schottenheimer. As I like to call him, Oppenheimer, because him and Jerry are probably going to blow up the Cowboys at some point in the season. So I like the pick. I went a different route. I think if I know Jerry, like I think I know Jerry, and I've never met the man, I just think people are probably whispering in his ear, Tetro McMillan. he plays like Dez Bryant. Because the thing is Dez Bryant had all
Joe
these.
Biden impersonation?
Yeah. T-Mac, I think, kind of reminds him of maybe like a Dez Bryant. Dez Bryant had the character concern issues. Jerry doesn't care. He likes big, fast, strong wide receivers, and he missed out on Randy Moss. So I think the Cowboys end up taking Tetro McMillan, which kind of doesn't make sense for me. I think they need to go defense. They have so many issues on that side of the ball.
They got a lot of holes to plug.
Yeah.
Miami Dolphins, I think it's a great fit for them. Ramsey wants out of town. Javon Holland's gone. I think if Malachi Starks is on the board, the safety out of Georgia, they grab him.
Really interesting prospect. So much versatility with him. I actually went a different route. I went offensive line, Kelvin Banks out of Texas. I really like Kelvin Banks. Really good player. I think since he was there at Texas, only gave up like a couple of sacks, or maybe not even a sack. But I just think if the Miami Dolphins really want to protect Tua, and if I'm Tua, I'm running to the front office and saying, I need you to get some help on this offensive line. We lost Teron Armstead. I've had all these concussions, and for the Dolphins, they have to address the offensive line. They need to improve that side of the ball. I agree with you in the Jalen Ramsey situation. It's a whole new secondary, so I think offensive line is the more prominent pick, the higher upside here.
At 14, we have the Colts. First tight end of the draft. I got Tyler Warren from Penn State going to the Colts.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. It's crazy because I feel like after the Brock Bowers season, everybody's kind of looking for that guy. Yeah. Let's just be honest here. Brock Bowers was a generational talent playing tight end. Mm-hmm. Tyler Warren, I think, is a really, really good player. So I like him here at 14.
Okay. Atlanta. Man, Atlanta's got a lot of issues on defense, and this is where I think that they go edge and they grab Mikael Williams from Georgia.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. So for Atlanta, I actually have them taking quarterback. No, I'm just kidding. Just go ahead and just grab another quarterback there. No, honestly, I like the edge, but the edge rusher I like here in this spot is Mike Green out of Marshall. Absolute juice coming off the edge. The last time the Atlanta Falcons had double-digit sacks from one guy was back in 2016, Vic Beasley. So Mike Green, former wide receiver, transfer to defensive end. He's got some speed, some juice. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I like him too. I think he may fall just because there's been some character issues.
Yeah.
And so that may hurt his draft stock. But as far as talent, as good as it gets. 16, Arizona. And apologize if I spell his name. I think we're going to see a really heavy edge rushing between 10 and 25. I've got Donovan Izuraka from Boston College at edge.
I like that. I thought too, because they had so many injuries on the defensive side of the ball last year. I think they brought some guys back healthy. They also brought in some familiar faces. They brought in Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson, Josh Sweat. So I actually went to the other side of the ball. I went offensive line, Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. This offensive line for the Cardinals has some issues at guard, and right tackle Jonah Williams has got 1 year on his left on his deal left, so I think Gray slides into guard and then maybe possibly right tackle after the season.
Can absolutely see that. 17, my Cincinnati Bengals. As much as I hate to say it, got a Michigan man. I think he's the best interior lineman available at this point, and I'm hoping they'll figure out something with Hendrickson if they do, and add Kenneth Grant from Michigan. I think that'll help what's pretty poor Cincinnati
I actually
defense.
love that pick. I mean, they have Chris Jenkins, who they took in the second round last year. Two Michigan men, put him on the defensive line. That's one of their strengths a couple years ago. So I have them going back to the defensive line as well. Regardless of, Trey Hendrickson is on the team or not, I still think they need an edge rusher outside of him on the opposite side. They lost Sam Hubbard to retirement. So I have them going with Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M, a guy who just plays with a lot of intensity. Relentless.
He doesn't get to the knock on him is he just doesn't I actually have him falling out of the first round.
Yeah, I think with the Senior Bowl, with the way he played, I think he showed that he can play against some of the big boys as well. So I think he still has a lot of upside. I think he still has a lot of room to grow. So I'm taking Shamar Stewart because he has some flexibility. You can slide him inside if you need to. You can keep him outside as well.
At 18, we got Seattle, and I got them marrying up with another Ohio State receiver. Of course, they got one now, but they're going to add Emeka Egbuka at 18. Seattle's going to go wide receiver.
I really like that. You know, they lose a couple of wide receivers, but they brought in Cooper Kupp. You still need to find someone to kind of take that Tyler Lockett role. As for me, I'm going with the offensive line, Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State. This Seattle offensive line has been kind of a weakness, especially in the interior at the guard and center position. I think Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State, was a guard originally, really great guard, and then once Josh Simmons went down, they asked him to play left tackle, and I would argue that he was better at left tackle than he was at guard. So I think Donovan Jackson has so much position flexibility as well. I think, he has some upside. In Seattle, you need to protect Sam Darnold. We saw what happens if you don't protect him. He gets a little scared, and, it goes bad.
I agree with that. Tampa Bay. Another Michigan man, Bob. I'm going with Colston Loveland, the tight end.
Yeah, whoa, okay. For me, I think they like Cade Otton there. I think he's a big piece of that offense. I think, the Bucs are in a good spot here. I think, they either probably go I like linebacker Jahad Campbell here, maybe Levante David getting up there in age, but I actually have them going to the secondary. I think they need to add some talent there. I think they need to find a lockdown corner. I'm going with Jahad Barron, corner out of Texas. He can play the nickel. He can play outside. Yep. I think he played really well in the college football playoffs against Ohio State. So I have them going to the secondary. They need to improve that side of the ball.
So at 20, I got my first trade. The Raiders I think they're going to target that North Carolina running back. However, the teams behind them, I don't think a running back isn't priority. So I think Green Bay gives the Raiders a call. And with the Raiders' 20th pick, Green Bay takes Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas.
Nice. Yeah, I like that a lot. So for me, I didn't do any trades. I wish we would have kind of done a couple of trades, but I got some ideas here for you. If I'm the Denver Broncos, this is...
Do you trade back if hoping that your guy... I think they're going to target...
Yeah.
I think they're going to target
I think they will. If anything, they probably want to move up because I think the Steelers right behind them, they lost Najee Harris. I think they would maybe want to move up and try to get a running back. I know the quarterback situation is
maybe that's why they do the trade or don't do it.
Yeah, but I have Denver Broncos taking Amarian Hampton out of North Carolina. Yeah. I think Sean Payton really needs a workhorse back. That's what he's always been accustomed to having in New Orleans. And Amarian Hampton, 3-down back. I think he's got some upside. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor. They can kind of do everything. And he still has a little bit of speed to, make the big plays.
And I do think that if they're nervous and he's available, that's who they go with.
Absolutely.
If they feel no one behind them's going to grab that, target him, then I think they may do a trade, and Green Bay may call and offer some more picks to move up. Pittsburgh at 21. I got Walter Nolan from Arkansas going to Pittsburgh. I think they're pretty thrilled to get him at 21.
Yeah, so for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think the Steelers are actually a team that would be probably looking to move back in the draft. This is a team that doesn't have a second-round pick. They still have the issue at quarterback. I do think Aaron Rodgers will eventually sign. I just don't know what's taking him so long.
Bob, thoughts on Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was checking something.
Yeah, but I think they go, maybe...
Usually that name triggers Bob.
Yeah, either a wide receiver here, but I have them going with Walter Nolan. I think they need to get somebody on that defense. Yeah, I think they need to get someone on the defensive line. Cameron Hayward, we don't know how many more seasons he has, and I can't help but think about that playoff game against the Ravens where they gave up 300-plus rushing yards to that division rival. I'm sure that one still hurts here.
At 22, the Chargers... they had McConkey. He had a great year. Yeah. But I think they really proved late in the season and in the playoffs that they really need a second receiver to complement that team. That's where I have Texas, Matthew Golden out of Texas going to.
I love that. That's such a great pick. I love, they give themselves a dynamic playmaker on the outside, somebody who's super reliable. I actually have them going a different direction. Jim Harbaugh, the Michigan man, I'm going back to Michigan because Jim Harbaugh wants as many Michigan players as he can get. I promise you that. And there's nobody that he loves more than Colston Loveland, the tight end. I don't think he's really an inline blocker. I think he's more of that wide receiver, kind of like the Brock Bowers. So looking at the AFC West, you have Brock Bowers in Las Vegas. You have Travis Kelce in Kansas City. This is their equalizer at that spot. He's a great receiving tight end. I know they have Will Dissly and they brought in Tyler Conklin, but those guys are going to be the blocking tight ends. And Colston Loveland is a guy that he recruited coming out of high school.
At 23, if we do the trade that I had talked about and Denver moves back, this is, of course, where I got them getting Hampton.
Yeah.
Of course, if it's Green Bay stays there and he's available, I have them grabbing because Green Bay would be at this spot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's where I have Shotty Byron.
Yeah.
If all things considered.
Yeah, for me, for the Packers, they're always interesting in the draft. They always seem to do the thing that nobody thinks that they're going to do. They have their own little way of doing everything. I think the Packers need to get a wide receiver. I look at, that wide receiver group last year, Jalen Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, all had injuries, suspensions, missed some time. I would love to get him a wide receiver to help out that group, but the Packers have not picked a wide receiver since 2002, Javon Walker.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're going to do it, and the draft is actually in Green Bay, but I'm going with edge rusher Donovan Ezaraku out of Boston College. The Packers just love to add edge rushers. Donovan actually, the defensive coordinator for the Packers, Jeff Hadley, was the head coach for Boston College just a couple of years ago, so I'm sure they're super familiar, and I think they bring him in.
Good. Minnesota at 24. This is where I actually have got to protect that Michigan man, McCarthy. Having said that, I got Donovan Jackson, offensive lineman from Ohio State, going to the Minnesota Vikings at 24. And who do you like?
I like that pick. They've done a lot to address the offensive line, defensive line. I think Minnesota is another team that's probably waiting for the phone to ring. They don't have a second-round pick. I think the guy that they want, they can probably get a little bit later in the first round, second round. But if they don't make that trade, the guy I really like is Nick Enowaru out of South Carolina, the NFL Combine Warrior, 6'3", 227, ran a 4.38. Freakish athlete. I think they lost Cameron Bynum. Harrison Smith is getting up there in age, so I think Nick comes in, he learns from one of the best, and they help improve that secondary.
That'd be a great pick. 25, we got Houston, and to me, really, the Houston offensive line has serious problems.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think they go with Josh Simmons, offensive tackle out of Ohio State.
Man, if he falls to that, that would be a slam dunk. I know that the Kansas City Chiefs are definitely a team that's wanting to trade up to get that offensive lineman. For me, I see what Houston's saying, and they have all these issues at the offensive line, but I think they've kind of done a pretty good job kind of piecing it all together. I think a bigger need actually might be the wide receiver position, and I had a toss-up on this one. It was really tough. I wanted to go wide receiver, from Ohio State, Bika. Yeah, I thought him being reunited with C.J. Stroud would be something special. C.J. Stroud absolutely loves him, but I think the guy that's a better fit would actually be wide receiver Matthew Golden out of Texas. Keep the kid in Texas. Yeah. He played at the University of Houston with Tank Dell. I think he's a better version of Christian Kirk right now.
At 26, the Rams. I actually have the Rams going with Jihad Campbell at this spot.
Yeah, me too. I think the Rams, we've seen them kind of mortgage their futures before because I thought, the Rams, I was trying to figure out a way for the Rams to move up in the draft to get Tyler Warren. That's who I think that they really like. They tried to trade up for Brock Bowers last year, but Jihad Campbell really helps out that defense. We saw what the Philadelphia Eagles did to them in the playoffs, and I think he perfect fit.
Ravens, and I think if he falls to 27, they'll be happy. I like James Pierce, edge out of Tennessee.
Yeah, I actually have the same
Ravens.
thing. I mean, you talk about the guy maybe with the highest ceiling other than Abdul Carter in the draft, James Pierce here. A couple things to know for the Ravens. They have a couple of guys who have 1 year left on their deal. And, you know, the Ravens always seem to get the best player at 27, 28 in the draft. Like, I don't know how they keep doing that. You
Them
know?
and the Eagles.
Yeah.
The Commanders are at 29, and this is where I have them grabbing.
We're at 28, yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, we're at the Lions right here at 28.
Lions. How did I miss the Lions? Go ahead. Who do you like?
Yeah, I have them. So, really interesting for the Lions. I think if they can find a way to make this work, I think they should use their first-round pick and send it to Cincinnati and try to get Trey Hendrickson. I don't know how the money works, but that would be my idea. But other than that, I have them going with an edge rusher. I have Nick Scranton from Texas A&M. You know, he flashed his first 2 years at Purdue. Texas A&M was a little bit of a down year, but he has a lot of the physical tools. I think putting him opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, you know, you continue to build that defensive front.
And this is where I have the Lions going with Shamar Stewart.
Yeah.
Out of A&M.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
Commanders at 29.
Yeah.
He slipped. He could make him pay, but I think because of the quote-unquote character issues, this is the only reason he went down, but I have Mike Green edge going to the Commanders.
Yeah, I think. Oh my goodness! As a Cowboys fan, I don't want to see that. We're gonna have to deal with Abdul Carter, and now you know the whole Philly front, and now this guy. I like that. So for me here at 29, I don't have an edge rusher that I like for the Commanders, and I think that's the biggest need for them. So once again, if I'm the Commanders, we don't have a lot of draft picks. So hey, what can we get for Trey Hendrickson? Well, we'll send you a first-round pick. I believe that the Commanders are the one team that can pay him. They have a lot of cap space to work with. You get a guy who's a proven edge rusher. You don't have to take a chance on one of these kids. So if they don't do that, that's an idea that I like. I have them going to the secondary with Siobhan Reevil out of East Carolina, a big 6'3" corner that, you know, Dan Quinn likes his big corners. So he doesn't have to play right away. He's coming off a torn ACL, but he has a lot of upside.
Gotcha. Buffalo, and I think if he falls in their lap, they're going to be thrilled. Another Michigan man. I have taken Will Johnson, cornerback, Buffalo.
Yeah, I like that. I think it works out a lot. Yeah, like that a lot. I actually have them going corner as well. Unfortunately, Will Johnson left a long time ago. Yeah, I have them going Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky.
Yeah.
One thing about the Bills is, especially in the playoffs, key moments, they gave up a lot of big plays. And what I like about Maxwell Hairston is he's got speed. He's got a 4.28 speed. He'd be a perfect nickel corner. Even if he does get beat, he has great recovery speed.
KC at 31. I've got him grabbing an edge rusher from Georgia, Mikal.
That's I can see Mikal falling at that point. I have them going to the offensive line. I have them going with Josh Connery out of Oregon. You know, the one thing that the Chiefs need to do is address this offensive line, and I think they need to be super aggressive. They have a couple picks in the top 100, so I think, you know, they have a chance to move up. Maybe, like I said, Pittsburgh wants to move back. Maybe Minnesota wants to move back, and they can jump up and get a guy here.
And what you don't want to do if you're a GM is do what I just did and draft a guy that's already been drafted, because I picked Mikal to go to Atlanta.
Well,
so.
they kind of prevent you from doing that.
Yeah.
Well, I just did.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with your pick.
Okay. For the Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl champions, Howie Roseman, who knows what this man is going to do? He's going to be moving up and down the boards. I think he's one of the best at doing the draft. So for the Philadelphia Eagles, I have them going with another Georgia Bulldog, because why not? Malachi Starks out of Georgia, the safety. Okay. You know, they lose a lot of guys, a lot of production experience in the secondary. I think Malachi Starks gives them some versatility. Like, you know, even with Cooper DeJean, they can kind of swap the nickel corner safety, you know, and I think that'd be a perfect fit for them.
Well, they did trade Gardner Johnson.
Yeah, to Houston,
Having said that, I got him going to South Carolina and picking up Nick Imawuri.
Yeah.
Safety.
Yeah, adding him to that defense would be absolutely insane.
And that's really their only need on defense, I feel.
Yeah, they definitely need to replenish some of the depth, but I think, you know, with them moving up and down the draft board, I think they'll be able to collect some more draft capital.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts?
Yeah, so for obviously, I don't have Shedeur Sanders going in the first round. I do truly believe that he will fall and slide. He'll still go in the first round, but I think he'll slide. And I think towards the end of that first round, when I look at a couple of teams, like I said, the Steelers, Vikings, the Commanders, I think those are teams that would easily trade out of the first round to collect some more draft capital. And I see the Cleveland Browns sliding back into the first round and taking Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders, teaming him back up with Travis Hunter. If they can manage to do that, I think Andrew Berry, I think Kevin Stefanski saved their jobs at that point. You know, they give Cleveland a little more excitement. Like I said, if there's anybody that's going to turn around the Cleveland Browns, it's going to be Shedeur Sanders. His time is here. And I think that would be kind of hilarious to see Shedeur go to Cleveland.
That would be interesting. But does Shedeur want to go to
I was
Cleveland?
like, look, hey, you want to be what's great about Shedeur is he wants to be great, and what tougher challenge than going to Cleveland to do it, you know?
Well, he's got genetics.
Pedigree.
No, I don't know about pedigree.
He's going to have to earn it, that's for sure, in Cleveland, yes.
Well, guys, tell us what you think of our mock draft. Tell us where we went right, where we went wrong. And it's all going to play out Thursday night. I'm probably going to go over to one of those, not Buffalo Wild Wings, but the other place off 410 and watch
Hooters.
the draft.
I don't think the Hooters are
Pluckers.
Pluckers?
Me and Bob went there last year, and they actually have a setup there where you can pick a team. They'll let you run up.
It's kind of like a trivia game show kind of thing. It's really fun. If you haven't done it, definitely should do it. Quick shout out to Bruno's Dive Bar. If you need a place to go get a couple drinks, that's going to be a great spot. And then Tommy John's Tailgate over there on Stone Oak area. Definitely go check them out. They got a lot of TVs, good food, good people, good drinks.
Sounds good. Bob?
Now we're good.
All right.
We're good.
Thursday night, we'll come back and discuss it next week. Until then, OH.
Peace out.
Hi-oh.